Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Bullets and Bourbon. I'm Matt Gunlock, and tonight we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So, this episode is going to be more of a monologue, and I'm going to be talking about something that I'm passionate about, which is the Marine Corps shooting team and the reason why we shifted or they shifted from the traditional shooting sports of high power and bullseye pistol into more practical shooting sports of today. Some of it is opinion, and other parts have been taken from references. So, um, one of the first thing I want to do is, or talk about is, what is the Marine Corps definition of lethality? That is a term that gets thrown out a lot. Um, in it kind of has become a bit of a catchphrase, but this is how the Marine Corps utilizes describing what lethality is, and they use a spear model, and this was taken from the marksmanship campaign plan, which was signed in September 16th of 2024 by CGT-COM. Um, but uh, so the spear model of lethality prioritizes five pillars of combat performance: speed, precision, executive control, adaptability, and risk exposure. Unlike traditional marksmanship models, Spear reflects the integration of physiological, psychological, and technical components that influence lethality in complex, high stress environment, and it moves beyond pure shooting mechanics to account for combat fatigue, decision making under fire, and sustained operational capability. So, what is the mission of the Marine Corps shooting team? This comes from Marine Corps Order 3591.2 Lima, which is to enhance marksmanship competition across the Marine Corps in order to increase combat effectiveness and lethality for the Marine Corps total force. And what's the commander's intent on this? It's to establish marksmanship training and competition program, and a competition program designed to strengthen the critical combat skill of small arms marksmanship throughout the Marine Corps. So, how is this accomplished through traditional means? The annual rifle training was a traditional metric that hasn't been changed since the 1940s. And if you even go back further, it really hasn't changed much since before then in the start of the national matches. Um, it wasn't until recently that we went to the annual rifle qualification. And what is the annual rifle qualification? It's still known distance, but you're utilizing barricades and cover and other elements that's part of your kit in order to engage targets. Resting your rifle on a barricade or resting it on your day pack to increase stability. Um, and so, often in the past, I've heard, about people on the team, and this goes back way back, but we had what was quote unquote called division matches, and they used to reach a lot more Marines. Like in each division match, you would have 400 plus Marines that would participate. And people would always say, "Oh, well, the team was winning at Camp Perry back then." But what were they actually learning at those division matches? You know, the day in and day out of that was you would go to the range and you would conduct your national match course of fire or a modified national match course of fire. You know, so that's what they did. And was I there? No. Do I know exactly what they did? No, but I could talk to some Marines, and definitely get the rundown of how they did it. And yes, it's easier to reach a larger amount of Marines whenever you're conducting a competition on a flat range where there's target points and you're just doing the same thing over and over again. But what were they actually learning? They were focusing on extreme fundamentals of marksmanship. They were going over the mechanics of marksmanship. Um, They were hitting small targets from four different shooting positions, but did they learn how to actually manipulate their weapon on their own? Was there any true evolution to the qualification over time? Did they actually shoot like that in combat? And I'm not trying to dog on it. That's what we had at the time. That's what was in place for so long. And it wasn't until recently, 2017 with the Marine Corps marksmanship competitions that the marksmanship has truly evolved. But back then, the team had a budget and resources where they can bring all those people in. They could cherry pick the best shooters from the division matches with minimal effort of instruction because all they did was compete in a sport that was redundant. Um, so also, and this is secondhand information, but like the team at the time, like they had so many people there that they would actually have a platoon that their sole purpose was to do range maintenance. Was I there? No, I'm not that old, but that's what I have been told. So, in the construct of the Marine Corps marksmanship competitions today, from when I was on the team to currently, Marines are taught in a hands-on format. They're focusing in small to medium groups, focusing on nothing but fundamentals of marksmanship and weapons manipulation, increasing speed as you go along in a discovery learning type format, utilizing time as a stressor to complete a task aimed at speed and accuracy. And you're probably wondering, why am I talking about this? And we're gonna talk about it a little bit more further, but it's because there's been talks of the bringing high power back, and it's just like, why are we having this discussion again? We've been over this, we've been through it. Why are we talking about it? And it's just a little frustrating because a lot of work has been done to try and evolve, to modernize, to focus on how we fight. And if you follow the Instagram page for Bullets and Bourbon, you probably seen my stories up that says, with the quote, tradition is just pure pressure from the dead. And that is absolutely true. Like, you know, the the Marine Corps is based on tradition. It absolutely is, and tradition should be a part of the Marine Corps. The tradition and history should never go away, and it's not a problem until it gets in the way with how we train to fight. And most of the time, it absolutely does not get in the way. But in this instance, where, for so long we competed in the same shooting sports, it absolutely got in the way of our evolution. And this is purely opinion here, but I feel like, you know, okay, the team of old, like going back in the early 1900s, even up till Vietnam, even after that, like that, all they had was high power and bullseye pistol. But it got to the point where, like, there were other shooting sports out there. What happened to doing some type of research and development to find a different shooting sport to participate in? No, what I personally feel is like that just became the norm, and the team just became a place of marksmanship where they weren't necessarily giving back to the total force as a whole, and they focused on, we need to win a national championship. We need to beat the Army marksmanship unit. We need to do that. We need to always perform, and that's great. That's great, but you need to think about, why do we have a team? Are we here just because we want to win, or are we here because we want to give back to the community? We want to give back to the Marine Corps and create the most lethal war fighter out there. So the Marine Corps' shift in training philosophy, or transition from bullseye to action shooting sports, such as multi-gun, PRS, and practical PCSL, is rooted in the need to replicate real-world engagements. Combat experience highlighted that lethality is less about pure marksmanship accuracy and more about timely, repeatable performance under pressure in uncertain environments. The traditional known distance range methods failed to fully address combat realistic performance metrics, including multiple threats, movement, time constraints, and shoot no shoot scenarios. Combat lessons learned from OIF and OEF stressed urban warfare demands close range, fast action engagements, like Fallujah and Marja. Complex environments emphasize judgment-based shooting over mechanical accuracy alone. Marines operating in distributed formations must have independent lethality and enhanced decision-making. Real-world performance often diverge from qualification scores, leading to reevaluation of what constitutes combat readiness. So, we're going to go into why the team was actually established. Were they established to win or to earn proficiency through marksmanship, you know, to win or to ensure proficiency through marksmanship, which occurred throughout the total force? So if you look at the preface in the Red Book, which the Red Book is the Marine Corps Competitive Marksmanship book. If you go distinguished, if you're on the team, you've seen it, you probably own it. And it says the triumphs and defeats at Camp Perry, Wakefield, and the Seagirt played a fundamental part in training and molding of combat Marines. The lines of these famous ranges produced shooters and techniques that augured well the successful battles of France, Nicaragua, Haiti, the Pacific Isles, and Korea. This was said by General David M. Shoup, Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time. Page 4 of the Red Book hits it beautifully. While competition is an important part of Marine Corps marksmanship, it is not an end in itself. The ultimate goal of all Marine Corps marksmanship is increasing the combat effectiveness of the individual Marine. For as one former commandant, General Van de Griff, remarked, it will be the man with the rifle who goes in and kicks the enemy out. And now I've heard some phrases thrown around recently, and in my opinion, they're weak, especially when you're saying it to Marines who haven't had the opportunity to go to combat. And it's a weak way to shut Marines down because you're wanting to make an emotional decision that benefits you, or you just don't know better. You have no idea about, knowledge and marksmanship. And I've been to combat, so I know what I'm talking about. I get it. Like Marines of the past, all they had to train on was high power, across the course type stuff. We're past that. It's been seen, and I've already stated it. OIF, OEF showed us what type of marksmanship that we need in order to perform and accurately engage the enemy. So saying phrases like that to make a point points out your lack of knowledge and marksmanship and just shows that you're a weak leader or a weak individual that hides behind your rank or your lack of knowledge. As an organization over the past few years, the team has been instrumental in developing training through collected data. That has done nothing but increase the level of confidence, proficiency, and lethality of Marines throughout the FMF. The Marine Corps shooting team stood up the AMTP program, which is the Advanced Marksmanship Training Program, which then it got renamed to IMTP, which is the Infantry Marksmanship Training Program. And former members of the team who have gotten out are now part of the JMAP program. And they're instructing Marines through data-driven exercises. These Marines maintain their skills by going out and competing in practical shooting competitions. In 2018, the capabilities-based assessment was completed and signed, and these were the gaps that were identified. Partial defilade targets, moving targets, multiple targets, unknown distance targets, and ranges of 50 to 300 meters. And to me, this sounds more like everything that practical shooting offers. Whether you can say, oh, well, 3-gun, you're never going to use a shotgun like that. Okay, well, then there's 2-gun. 2-gun closely replicates it. Or there's carbine matches. Or how about PRS matches? Like those constantly replicate what the decision making process um, of how you're going to engage targets. It gives you the keys to the kingdom to make you a better shooter and a better marine at engaging long range, mid range, and short range targets. So, the to kind of highlight those points here in a more, I don't know, intelligent manner, but the Combat Marksmanship from 2018 concluded that the annual rifle training no longer reflected the realities of the modern threat environment or the demands of the fighting operating environment. In response, the assessment recommended modifying rifle marksmanship training to reflect current and future threats by addressing smooth transitions between cover and exposure, marksmanship while moving, train the neural pathways to make better decisions under pressure, and to build adaptable and self correcting shooters. These findings led to significant updates to the annual rifle and pistol qualification standards, and Marines trained using the Infantry Marksmanship Training Package and evaluated under the Joint Marksmanship Assessment Package, which was the JMAP, consistently outperformed their traditionally trained counterparts, often doubling performance in key metrics. These changes mark a shift toward developing adaptable, combat effective shooters rather than simply reinforcing traditional marksmanship disciplines. So here's some stuff from the Force Design 2030 plan, and you can look up Force Design 2030. Just type it in Google, and they're updating Force Design every single year. But to get to those quotes, it's the first one is the individual slash force element which shoots first has the decisive advantage. And then the next one is modernization is continuous and evolutionary. However, we must accelerate it significantly across the training and education continuum to keep closer pace with emerging technologies and methodologies if we are going to continue to maintain our competitive edge relative to our adversaries. TCOM will lead revolutionary change and accelerate modernization through an informed, balanced, and synchronized approach to increase the lethality of the force, while continuing to be the bearer of rigorous, repeatable standards of excellence throughout the training and education enterprise. And that was from the Force Design Annual Update 2024. So, um, you know, the next part is, we'll go back to that Force Design 2030 and how it relates. I think with the current methodologies of how the team is performing or competing, that kind of goes hand in hand with the evolution and modernization of the shooting team compared to bringing back an antiquated discipline that's only going to focus on the mechanics, the pure fundamentals and the extreme accuracy that those sports give. Do you need those to shoot? Absolutely. But what happened to I understand the fundamentals and now it's time to build upon those skills, which that's what practical shooting does for you. You build upon the fundamentals and you get faster, you get better, your decision cycle making cycles become more fluid. Whereas in in high power and bullseye pistol, it's the same course of fire over and over again. You are going at the same pace. You have 10 minutes slow fire. It's kind of like, what the hell? Like, when are you ever going to engage targets at that type of pace? Whereas in practical shooting, you're trying to go as fast and accurately as you can. This next part is, in reference to people saying, why aren't we winning? What happened? The team just isn't performing. Well, how do we win? I'll say this. Marines on the shooting team have a very short lifespan. The first year, unless you have been exposed to competitive marksmanship previously, are just getting the Marines are just getting their feet under them. The second year, they've built their confidence up. They've been teaching more, and they have more of a firm understanding of how things are ran. And then the third year is typically like their year to shine. But this only happens if you give them the time and the resources to do just that. Um, so this is one thing I'll say. The team needs to be treated like a professional sports team. They need to be properly outfitted, resourced, and regarded like true professionals. Like if your focus is on always winning, that's how they need to be treated. Um, they do a very good job at demonstrating their skills and abilities, and they're highly talented individuals, every single one of them, and they absolutely love what they do. They love to teach, and they love to go out and compete. But there needs to be a balance. Um, they can't be completely selfish and do nothing but go out there and compete, but then they can't just be stranglehold on a range, as some, just support constantly. So if you're curious as to why aren't they winning or how do they win, well, that's it. They need to be treated like a professional sports team. Um, then why is the AMU so good? Well, first, they recruit people that are basically national champions right out the gate. They have the budget to compete in everything. And again, going back to high power and bullseye pistol as a sport, I'm not against it as a sport. But whenever it comes to increasing lethality and proficiency in order to make the most lethal Marine, that's where I have the problem. So if you think I have a problem with high power and bullseye pistol, I don't. And I don't have a problem with it as a sport. I have, like I said, my problem is, keeping it around in the Marine Corps. If you want to go shoot it because that's what you like, do it. Go right ahead. But it's not going to translate into combat marksmanship. It's not going to close the gaps in the CBA. The AMU has a budget to outfit their competitors with firearms that are more congruent to the sport and specifically to the divisions that they shoot in, and compared to the Marines that are using weapons that have been in the armory for 10 plus years and they just keep modifying them or fixing them and all that. Or they're going out and spending their own money and using their own personal guns. So one thing I'll say is comparing us to the AMU is a extremely flawed approach. They spend their entire career. They can spend 20 years on the AMU. Um, they, and the AMU, like their mission, they have a multifaceted mission focusing on enhancing Army marksmanship capabilities, promoting the Army brand, and supporting recruiting efforts. They fall under Army Recruiting Command. They have a lot of money, whereas the Marine Corps, as we know, does not. Um, but here's another thing. Are they not winning, or is it just kind of a lack of exposure, not being highlighted? Um, I would say that individual Marines on the team are performing at a very high level. And what most people don't realize is, it takes a lot of work to get to the level that they're at, and they do take the time to work on those skills. Um, but to kind of close this out, well, I had one. Um, have one other thing I wanted to bring up before I close it out. Um, to the competitors that plan on attending the Mix, which style would you prefer? The old division match style where you're just doing across the course match of 500 yards, um, or would you prefer the current construct? And I ask this seriously, like, what is going to get you out there to a Marine Corps marksmanship competition? What do you think is going to be more fun? What do you think you're going to learn more? What do you think is going to make you more capable at engaging enemies at various distances and uh, have that level of lethality that you need, individual level of lethality. And I say fun because Marksmanship should be fun, and we often joke the Marine Corps can suck the life out of anything. And we used to say that on the range all the time, because yeah, it did. Most of my career, I absolutely hated going to the range. I didn't even know what the Marine Corps shooting team was, to be honest with you, until about 2013 when I was watching TV and saw James Gill on the Outdoor Channel competing at Three Gun in Three Gun Nation, and you know what happened with that. And I get it. The Warriors kind of took the focus away from other activities because people were just going on back-to-back deployments all the time. But it's like that would have been a perfect time to take lessons learned from combat and then feed them to the team and then like, hey guys, like look at this, what can we do? What can we do to make better warfighters, to make better marksmen? um and that's what should be done, anytime that we're involved in some type of uh engagement, you know there should be studies done. It should be looked at. But, you know, if the Marine Corps shooting team went back to across the course style of shooting from bullseye, would you want to be a part of that? And let me know. Or would you rather keep it the way it is and learn the skills that are going to kind of keep you alive? But I digress, and I'm going to close with this. If the entire Marine Corps is focused on modernization and evolution, why do I see comments or have conversations with individuals who are dead set on bringing Bullseye back for the team, especially when that will increase the cost of a limited resource team who has divested the majority of that equipment? Since when do we have a prescribed amount of time to engage a target in combat or shoot one-handed while our other hand is in our pocket like we're shooting old flintlock pistols? We cannot make emotional decisions based on things we are passionate about, and we must continue looking toward the future to make data-driven decisions that will positively impact the force at large. That was just kind of uh, a summary of everything I already discussed. This is the first time I think I've ever done a monologue. I wanted to hit things that have been going on in my head, and I've been having conversations with other people about. And it's just kind of concerning whenever you hear little rumblings, or you just catch wind or see Facebook comments. And it's just bringing everything to light and kind of unloading and letting you know my thoughts on this. But let me know what you think. Hope you have a good one. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope this brings some more insight. If you're interested in seeing any of the references, where I got them from, all that kind of stuff, let me know. I'll try and get them to you. But I hope you have a good one. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll talk to you later.